I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I am going to do just a simple little peyote stitch with our new DiscDuos. They are a 6mm disc and they have 2 holes in them. So they're kind of like the round duo, but they are just squashed flat. They almost look like a tiny tic-tac or something like that just have that disc shape 2 holes. And we have them in a number of colors right now, and we'll be growing that color range. But I'm going to be using the jet and the jet bronze for this. A lot of times when we get new beads in, I like to show you just simple peyote with it and what they look like, so I'll do that as well. I'm going to be using the 11-0 in the Crystal Labrador, which is a Miyuki seed bead with a check coating on it, nice bright silver. And I'm going to be closing it off with the same color, the Crystal Labrador Fool cut button that I'm working with. I have handy because I'm going to be doing peyote stitch and doing bead weaving. And it wouldn't really matter which beads I'm doing this with. You'd want these same tools that I have sitting here. I have a size 10 English beading needle. We have the Pony brand here that I like. I have some scissors. These are the slip and snip scissors, and these are going to cut my thread. To get close to the end and make sure the thread's burned down, I have my thread zap 2. I have either flat nose or needle nose, doesn't matter which one you're using. You just want to make sure even a wide jaw pliers will work. This is going to help once you cut your thread or burn your thread to flatten it out to make it easier to thread your needle. I'm using 0.006 Wildfire beading thread in the green color. I could use black too, but I had green closest to me and green handy. You always want to match your thread color to your beads, especially you want to make sure if you can see through the beads or they have a lining to them. Generally you want to use the white unless it's a color lined, then I use the green color for that. I'm also working on a bead mat. And my bead mat is going to stop my beads from rolling around and stop them from kind of moving as I'm working with it. Also, it'll allow me to pick up easier once I'm using my needle. So this here, no matter which beads you're working with, if this is your first attempt at something, it's a great idea to have all of these things handy. Also, if you do glue, you can have some super new glue handy as well. And I'll show you that just at the end in case you do want to get your project glued. Some people like to glue, some people don't like to glue. It's kind of up to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start out, peyote uses a fair amount of thread. So I'm going to start out by cutting off 5 feet of my beading thread. And they usually have this blister pack cover there. Take that off, don't lose it though, because you want to keep it and put that back on. I'm going to take my thread off the spool here, put that back on, and then you can either use your scissors or your burner in order to cut this thread. Once I have my thread cut and kind of my beads laid out, I'm going to take my pliers, squash down the end of that thread, pick up my needle, thread my needle. When you're looking at a needle too, even though it's really tiny and you have trouble seeing it, there are 2 sides to a needle, the back end and the front side, the way that they would punch through it or manufacture it. So you always want to try to go in from the back. It's going to be a bigger hole. And then towards the front. I'm pulling through a fair amount of tail, so I don't need to bead weave through a lot of my beads. Because we are working with one needle and doing a peyote stitch, we're not actually going to be starting out with an actual clasp. So we're going to add that after the fact. What I am going to start out with is just a stop bead. And usually I like to use beads that are not in my project. So I have a bead sitting here left over from the Jasmine bracelet that I did, that Picasso bead, and I'm going to put that on to start. To start, I'm going to take that stop bead, put it on my needle, and thread it down to the end of the thread, leaving about 10 inches. That 10 inches is going to allow me to put the needle on the other side once I'm finished and add my cut button or my loop. I'm sewing back through that stop bead 2 times with my needle sewing away from that 10-inch tail. And that's going to have 2 pieces of thread show on the outside of your stop bead. Again, it's always a great idea to use a stop bead that is not part of your project. That way you make sure that you don't have that included in your project or weave through it by accident. Now that I have that stop bead in place, I'm going to get ready to start picking up my supplies. If you do need any supplies, you can get them at our local bead store if it's close to you. You can check that out at PotomacBeads.com and see if there is a store close to you. If there's not, you can always shop with us online for any of these products. In the Show More button right underneath this video here in the description will be links to all the products that I actually used in the video if you do need to purchase them from us, and we're happy to ship them out to you. And I have my DiscDuos here sitting in the pattern that I'm going to be creating. I'm going to do this 3 wide, which is an odd count peyote. However, because I'm using a 2-hole bead, it's not going to matter as much. You'll see a little bit of thread here at the ends, but that's okay. I'm going to be running my brass beads here down the middle, and those bronze, and then I'm going to be using jet on the side. To start, I'm going to put on 3 beads, and then thereafter I'm going to be putting on the alternating color. That's going to leave the bottom hole of this brass color empty, so don't worry, we're going to come back and fix that. To start out, I'm going to pick up one of my DiscDuos, and I'm picking up my jet. You can do this in 1 color, 3 color, 2 colors. You can do it 5 wide, 6 wide, kind of up to you. I'm just doing a narrow one, so I'm going to do 3 wide. And I'm going into 3 DiscDuos. I'm using the jet color on either side and then that bronze color in the middle. We're going to want it to sit like this once we start working on it. Again, we're going to ignore that bottom hole of the bronze DiscDuo, and we're going to come back to the top of the black hole. I'm going to let all 3 of these beads slide down to the start of my stop bead there. Again, you want to think about the fact that you're leaving an empty hole of the DiscDuo, and this is the same for any 2-hole bead peyote. You're going to be leaving one of the beads, or 2 of the beads if you're doing it wider, open there. When I'm on the side of the DiscDuo and the end of the peyote, I'm going to put on 3 of those Crystal Labrador full beads and go back towards the stop bead, towards the start, through the second hole of the 3rd DiscDuo that I added on. When I pull tight then, that's going to bring my thread so that it's coming out in the middle of my project. When I'm in the middle there, I'm going to add my middle color, which is my bronze, and I'm going to sew out on the other side of the black DiscDuo on the other side going through the second hole. So you can see they line up nice and flat. Because I am doing odd count and I'm using 3 to get my pattern, we are going to have an exposed thread, that bridge thread, on one side going from one DiscDuo to the other, and on the other side is just going to decorate going from one hole of the same DiscDuo to the other. That being said, I'm still using 3 beads, and then I'm going to pick up my next DiscDuo. So through the bronze, and just let that hang out there. When I come out the other side, I'm going to add another one of my jet DiscDuos. Let that drop down. And then when I'm on this side here, 3 more of my seed beads get added. And I'm sewing through that same DiscDuo through the second hole and towards the middle of the project. Oh, and I got an extra seed bead there, so we'll sew out there. Get that extra seed bead out and resew. Pull nice and tight, and there you have the look that it's going to keep going. So again, I'm going to add a bronze in the middle, sew through to the jet. The nice thing when you're using 2 colors, and because the DiscDuos are a little bit larger than your average seed bead, it's going to go really quickly. And because it has 2 holes, it's really easy to learn peyote with 2 holes. I add my 3 seed beads then once I'm coming out the side with the stop bead, and I add my next DiscDuo. I'm going to sew through the bronze towards the other side, so you're always going from one side to the other and kind of zigzagging across. Once I add my jet here, now that you've got the pattern, I'm going to pick up my 3 seed beads right away. Let that all fall down. Sew back through that DiscDuo towards the middle. So I'm just sewing away from the stop bead side towards the stop bead side, or up and down depending on which way you're sewing. Some people like to always sew the same way, so you can flip your project if you like to always sew down or like to always sew up. I tend to like to sew up, but a lot of times I try not to move the project while I'm teaching you because I don't want to make you confused at all. But I'm just going to continue. So at this point, if you do like to flip and sew up, you just flip your project and then continue to sew up. If you do flip your project, an easy way to stay on target and to remember which side is what side you have that stop bead on. It's a very simple pattern, peyote with 2-hole bead, and this is the 2-hole disc. And we're just going to continue adding the whole length of the wrist. I'm going to make right about a 7-inch bracelet. So I'm going to continue and stop about 1/4 inch before there. That's going to give me enough space to add my clasp and my loop for my clasp. And once I have the length that I want, so about 6 3/4 inch, then I'll stop, come back to you guys, and show you how to put on the clasp. I'm getting towards the end now, and I have my desired length. What you want to do is you want to pull it apart a little bit. That's going to be your length. Because of kind of the accordion side, it can shrink up a little bit. It's also a great collar if you would want to do it that way, that you can do the collar so the picot trim kind of sits down and you could actually add more beads to it. Just thinking it's very Cleopatra and kind of that Egyptian look if you would want to do it as a necklace. As I'm working on this, I'm tempted to keep going. However, I'm going to show you how you can kind of join the sides a little bit and have the sides look fully connected if you would want that, or you just keep it simple like you've done with the peyote. I have my last of my bronze beads on here, and what I'm going to do is sew through just like I was going to add another bead. And instead of adding another bead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 5 beads in order to connect to that last hole. So I have my 5 beads going on, and then I'm going to connect to the last hole here of that bronze bead. And see, that's just going to kind of decorate the end. At this point, I'm going to add my clasp, and then I'm going to come back and do the same thing, adding 5 beads on the other side. To add my clasp, I'm going to be bringing it out of this last DiscDuo here, and I want it to come and form almost a Y or a V right after there. So I'm going to add 3 of my 11 OC beads onto my needle, and then I'm going to go up the back there of my cup button. Once I'm in the cup button, I didn't think about this, but I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to add my DiscDuo kind of right on the top there. And I'm only going to be going through one hole this pass, and I'll kind of center it by bringing it through the other hole on the next pass through. And what I'm going to do is go through then down the bottom side of the cup button. And right now, because I'm only on one side there, it's going to sit up a little bit. When I come back around, we'll kind of fold that in and make sure that it sticks down. When I'm on the outer or the back side here, I'm going to add 3 more 11/0s. And I'm going to sew through that DiscDuo, the bronze one again. So you can see this is going to kind of round it out and bring it in a circle there. To reinforce, I'm going to go up through those 3 C beads, come out the top of the cup button. Here's where I'm going to catch the other hole of the DiscDuo, going through there, forcing it to lay down. I'm going to go through the cup button on the other side. And what that's going to do when you pull it tight is force that little DiscDuo to sit right inside the cup button. And I know it's kind of hard to see because of the glare, because the button's so shiny, but it just adds a nice little look to it and adds a variety to the actual color of the cup button. I always like to add something in the middle of the cup button, whether or not, actually I have earrings on, whether or not you're gluing in Swarovskis into them. And I just have these glued on with a bail and have an earring, but you can glue those in. You can usually add any of the beads that you're using, so I like to decorate it. Once I'm out, then I'm going to come down the beads on the other side. So I'm coming down those 3 beads, and if you can, once you go come out the cup button, you can try to grab those right away. It makes it easier. I'm going to go through that DiscDuo one more time, over to the other side. Once I'm at the other side, I'm going to repeat using 5 of my 11/0s. And I'm going to sew down the row of the 3 on the side. When we did the odd count, we had 3 on top of one of the DiscDuos going from one hole to the other, and on the other side we had 3 arching from and connecting 2 DiscDuos. What I'm going to do now is run up and down, really decorating the whole bracelet. I'm going to run down the one side and then down the other side. And all I'm going to do is basically add the missing 3 beads. So I'm coming out the 3 beads that were on top of the first DiscDuo. I add 3 more 11/0s. And then I'm going to sew through the next 3 seed beads. Keep going, adding 3s. And it's going to basically create a line the whole way down the project. Once I get to the end, then I get to do the other side. So you can see it just frames out the entire bracelet. And I could have, if I wanted to, done a different size bead or a 15/0 if you don't want it to be as obvious, or I could do a different color. The options really are quite endless, but adding these 3 in just creates a nice centered row and look to the DiscDuo bracelet. So all I'm going to do is continue down this line, adding 3 beads and connecting to the 3 beads that are already there. So I've now gone down the one whole side of my bracelet. And again, you could have stopped at this point once you got finished with the side decoration, or once you got the clasp on, you could have just come right down and added the needle to the other end of your thread. I came down the whole pass again, adding 3 beads in between the 3 that were already there, connecting all of them and creating that nice kind of seamless line on the edge of this DiscDuo Peyote bracelet. I am going to start basically my loop. I still have just a tiny bit of thread left on my needle end, and soon I'm going to take off and switch to the other one. But what I'm going to do is repeat the first side by adding 5 11/0 seed beads and sewing through that DiscDuo. At that point, I'm pulling a fair amount and giving a fair amount of tension because I do want that line there at the back to be seamless. The line here at the bottom will create them with the thread that we have the stop bead on. So my thread and my needle are getting really short on that first side, so I'm not going to have enough to do my loop. So what I'm going to do is just take that thread and needle, leave it hang out there, take that needle end off, go to the other end here, and what I'm going to do then is put a needle on this end. I'm going to take off my stop bead. Sometimes you can use a little bit of pressure and get your stop bead off right away by just pulling on the thread. Sometimes you have to sew back through it and get it off that way. So I'm just going to show you how to sew back through. So you sew through once. If you get caught right away, try to sew back again. Whenever you sew through beads, especially beads that have a fairly bigger hole, like an 8/0 or a delicate bead, you always want to make sure you're sewing in the middle of the bead and never kind of towards the side, because that's going to be your first chance to catch on threads. You can also grab on the sides here of the thread, trying to see which one is the outer thread. Actually, I should have seen if it, yep, let me move it, so that'll give me an opportunity to kind of get out. The other thing you can do is back through it with the first end. That'll take one out, then you can go through and back through again with the other end and pull it right out. Once the stop bead is off, I'm going to start my loop end, and I'm going to add about 25 of my 11/0 seed beads. And first I'm going to add my 5. Sew through my DiscDuo. Once I'm coming out there, I'm going to add my 3 beads to create my Y effect. And then I'm going to start my loop. So I just need to pour out a couple more beads here. Start my loop. Get about 25 beads in your loop will be sufficient if you're using a cut button. If you're using a different clasp or closure, you want to make sure if you are using a metal closure, I like to recommend using wire protectors if you're a big fan of toggles. I have found that the cut buttons are really, really easy to get on and off, so I kind of use those exclusively. We also have some awesome pewter buttons. I use those a lot because I like that metallic look. But we do have a bunch of toggles and lobsters and all of that too if you want a traditional clasp. Once I have my seed beads on, I'm going to go back through the 4th bead in the row. So I had added 3 to get that V effect, and I'm going back through the 4th. And what that's going to do is create that loop for my cut button. I'm going to add 3 more beads. Oops. And so back through my DiscDuo to the other side. There you can see that little V effect and the loop that was created. If you want to, you can use your seed beads and do a peyote stitch for that. I'm going to go back through now and reinforce. What that means is I'm taking my needle and thread back through everything that I just added. And that's going to then have 2 pieces of thread going through the end. Whenever you do clasps, it's always nice to note that at the ends of your bracelets are where you're going to get the most tension. So we reinforced both the button and now we're reinforcing the loop as well. Once I come out here on this other side, because my thread's getting short, because I usually don't do the full 5 feet, it's too much to pull through on the camera. So I have just a little bit of thread left. I'll add some more to do this end. But first what I'm going to do is I am going to tie off these 2 threads. So I'm going to remove my needle and tie those 2 threads together. It's going to create a little knot there. Because I'm using the green thread, you won't really see it. I'm not going to glue there yet. What I am going to do though is take my cutter and just cut down, that way I don't see that thread hanging out there. Now what I'm going to do is get a little piece of thread and get a needle on that and show you how I'm going to attach that in order to add the seed beads down the other side. So I'm getting ready to add my new piece of thread. I already have a knot there, so I don't want to add in that same place. And I don't have any knots here at the beginning, so that's where I'll start. Keep in mind that you're going to need a knot at the start and at the end of your row. When I get down here to the end that I created, we'll bring the thread over here and actually knot over on this end. So to start out, all I'm going to do is very simply grab onto what's called a bridge thread. So I'm going underneath my seed beads, taking my thread mainly through the whole way, and I'm really just going to tie a knot. You want to make sure that the knot that you tie is going to go between seed beads. I'm going to tie that again. I am going to come back then and glue that. If you wanted to, you could have tied off one of these threads and tied onto that. Doesn't really matter which way you do. Some people are very firm believers in sewing back through the project and doing that. If I'm doing a project where you're not going to be able to disguise the knot, or you don't think the knot is going to hold well because you're doing little beads, then I'll do that and sew back through and kind of knot along the line. You can just knot simply on with this project because you can conceal that knot and it's rather big beads. Once I have that there, I am going to sew down my line here and sew down these 4 beads because I knotted between the first and second, so I have 4 more on that little row, and then simply add your 3s. 3 beads on, catch the 3 on the side. 3 more beads on, catch the 3 on the side. So we're just repeating what we did down the whole side. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I do like to go into detail and tricks and tips because there are a lot of new bead weavers that watch these videos. So I'm going to go down the whole side now, adding those additional 3 beads to get that line nice and in place to mirror the other side. I'm down to the end here and I have my last 3 to add. And I'm going to go through all 3 and go through the 5 there at the end, sewing through the DiscDuo, past that knot, and so you don't want to kind of glue anything until you're really done if you're gluing, because God forbid you sew or glue that and then sew through. Try to sew through and it's all glued shut. So you can see here I'm on the side, and what I'm doing is just sewing down the side a little bit. That way my knots are not near one another, so I don't have lots of bumps near one another. I'm going to do a sewer's knot here on the side, doing a little loop there, sewing through the loop with my needle, making sure I'm between the same bead that I'm coming out of, pull that knot. And then I'm going to go into the middle here, into one of the DiscDuos. Pull my thread there into the middle, go underneath one of those threads, knot as well, and that's going to create another knot. Sew through. Generally on projects I usually knot about 3 times. Once I'm out the edge here, pull out one of those threads and do that sewer's knot again. And then you're going to be nice and finished. So you get your awesome quick peyote bracelet. I really didn't do much off screen, probably about 10 minutes, so this whole video was just devoted to creating this bracelet. I'm trimming down my threads right now, and I'm going to get out my super new glue. And once I have that out, which I apologize I forgot to get out beforehand, once I have that super new glue out, I'm going to just do a dab on each little knot area, dabbing my glue on all those surfaces. If you get a lot of super new glue out and too much, you can always dab it on your bead mat too, and that'll take the rest of that away. You also want to make sure never to glue to your bead mat. So if you have a tendency to kind of drop out a lot of glue, or your super glue bottle doesn't, or you have one of those tubes, the tubes are kind of ugly and messy and get nasty, but just do it off of your bead mat so you don't stick onto it. Once I have that, I'm going to take my thread burner and I'm just going to burn down those thread ends. If you wanted to, you can cut these a little bit shorter too, but I just like to burn down the thread ends. It's kind of addicting using the thread burner. That one's pretty long, but I'll burn it down anyway. You can see I'm just taking that right along that line. Most of the smoke that's being created here is the glue doing the burner burning off the glue there. And there you have it. You are all done your creation. It's an awesome little peyote stitch DiscDuo bracelet, and with the cup button it's really easy to put on and off. Again, this is about 7 inches. I have a tiny wrist, so it kind of goes up pretty far on me, but it has that awesome, you know, peyote look with a lot less effort than doing your standard peyote stitch. You can do a ladder stitch back and forth if you want to do different kind of designs on the side. So keep in mind there's a couple different ways to do the bracelet, but it's a good introduction to peyote because it does have the 2 holes. The side decoration was just kind of an added extra little thing at the end. They will start to flatten out a little bit. One side has a little bit of the ridges and the other side doesn't, just because of the way that it's connecting. They'll flatten out and start to look similar. Plus when you have it on your bracelet and on your wrist, you can't really tell. So if you do need any of these DiscDuos, again, you can get them from us online or in stores. You can visit PotomacBeads.com to figure out where those stores are and also to shop online. In the show more, under the details of this video, you can get links to all of the products that were used so you can purchase if you need them. And also you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way, if you see this video, other videos, want ideas, or some of the other ones that are made, some of the different designs, you'll get updates when we do those as well. So everyone, thanks a lot for watching. Have fun using these new 2-hole Potomac Bead Company DiscDuo beads and topping them off with a nice cuff button. Thanks everyone for watching.